Good morning. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Monday Market Update. I'm Nash Paradise, joined as frequently as I can get him on here by Andrew Cady. How are you doing this morning, Andrew?
Doing amazing. Had a great weekend. I don't know about yourself, but I was at a wedding over the weekend in New York City. So I got my big city vibes and some cold weather and a little bit of shopping in for Christmas. It was a good weekend. How about you?
Just a little cold weather. Yeah, I got that cold weather now. It was like 33 degrees here in Texas this morning, which is why I'm all bundled up in the hoodie, trying to stay warm. Got a sick kiddo, so hanging out at the house doing dad stuff here. But had a good relaxing weekend. Hung out, like I said, no one's feeling good in the house, so we are just doing what we can do, hanging out and having a good time. Speaking of a good time, let's talk about what went on last week, and maybe not necessarily a good time because the data and the analytics from last week, they feel a little light. There was a week that had some movement in the bond market, a little bit of stuff going on behind the scenes. But as far as data points go, the manufacturing PMI report from ISM came in, and that was a little bit low. Okay, cool, neat. ADP employment, though, kind of messed things up on Wednesday. I don't know when 42,000 jobs added from ADP is a good thing or should create some kind of market movement that way. But I guess when the projection is 25,000, a beat of 17,000 is a beat. So ADP,
Right.
not big there.
It's like investors look at the percentage that it beat by and not the actual data. Like, oh my gosh, that's 100% over the projections. Well, if the economy projected there was one job added and we added two, is that a reason for sell-off? Like at some point, investors need to look at the fact that bad jobs data is bad jobs data. 44,000 job creations over the course of a month in a country of 340 million people. It's not a really good economic standard.
It's not, but to play devil's advocate for the overreaction, you got to look at the previous data. We were negative 32,000. That was revised down to or up to negative 29,000. It's weird to see jobs data get revised by, 3,000 as opposed to the BLS data and how far that gets revised. So good job, ADP. Y'all should have your information together because it's literally your own information. But to go from a 32,000 loss to 42,000 gain certainly points to a direction and some movement in the economy. So, that would give some signal to investors on how to react. But plus, we just don't have data. We don't have the right kind of data. We don't know what is going on with jobs right now, not to a severe degree anyway, but this data becomes more significant. As we got to the end of the week last week, had a lot to do with consumer sentiment. The University of Michigan condition sentiment, consumer sentiment November numbers came out. No one's feeling real good right now. It's some of the worst consumer sentiment that we've seen in a long time. And that's not surprising considering where we are with, the government being shut down and affordability being low. What are your thoughts on all the sentiment figures being, pretty mediocre?
So I think the market's reaction, like I had said earlier, beating expectations by 23,000 jobs isn't a game-changing thing. However, we're not seeing the BLS data, but I think, coming off of the previous time you and I had met about this, Fed Powell talking about, that a December rate cut is not in the bag. In fact, it's far from it. Very similar to the words he said. And I think we see a jobs report that beats any gains at all, and I think it puts pause. And the
Yeah.
market tends to react like, okay, is this just feeding the Fed the ammunition for that December pause that they've been thinking about? You would think the consumer sentiment would undo some of that, but I do think investors realize the Fed isn't looking so much at consumer sentiment. They're looking at jobs, they're looking at CPI, they're just looking at really two things: labor and maximum employment and price stability. They don't really care about consumer sentiment. And so I think consumer sentiment should have undone some of the work that was done, but I think the ADP numbers just spooked investors enough to say, hey, maybe Fed Powell actually has a point. Maybe they are going to pause the December rate cut.
Speaking of spooky numbers, let's talk about what we got going on this week. So really nothing today. Tomorrow markets are closed for Veterans Day, so we're having to wait until Wednesday to get any big movement. Oh wait, no, we don't, because the market's been going nuts this morning, but we'll talk about that in a second. We've got Wednesday full of speeches: Williams, Paulson, Waller, Bostic, Mirren. And then Thursday should have been a huge day. Now it's going to be a pretty good day, where we've got CPI month over month and year over year. We've got a whole slew of where we would normally get jobless claims, continued claims, and employment. We ain't getting that. So there's also a couple of big bond auctions, Hammock speaking, crude oil inventory, and then all the federal budget stuff is not coming out like it normally would on Thursday either. Friday's got a couple things in here too. We've got PPI, retail sales, more retail sales. So this is the inflation week, all about inflation. So ADP was the only real jobs report last week. It did not go our way. This week is all loaded up with inflation data. If we look at the previous versus the projections here, we're looking pretty flat. The last time we went through these numbers, you and I talked, they were, anticipating some small increases in inflation, nothing crazy, and everything came in pretty much chalk. What are you expecting here for this week?
I think we're probably going to see a similar boat. There's nothing really out there that concerns me on the inflation front. We haven't seen a big run on anything. My component I always check when you talk about, the core inflation is the shelter cost. And I think that's something that we always have to keep an eye on. Shelter, if you aren't familiar with how shelter works, one of the biggest components, it's almost 45% of core CPI. A lot of it is made up from rental statistics. And rents, we understand, only go up typically once a year. Most leases are 12-month leases. So if I called Nash today and he was renting, and I said, hey, Nash, what are you paying for rent in your market for this size apartment or this size home? Nash says, well, I'm paying $4,000 a month. Well, Nash may be on month 11 of a 12-month lease, and next month his landlord might be raising that to $4,900. So there's a huge lag in the rental numbers. And then you also factor in owner's equivalent rent, OEC or OER. That's where I would call Nash and I would say, hey, Nash, how much do you think you could get in rent for your house? Now, you ask me, what inexperienced landlord, just a homeowner, has an understanding of what they could get for rent? I would venture to say I could get $10,000 a month for my house. I just think I could. Realistically, I'll probably get 4,000, but some of the numbers they're pulling into here are just wild in the way they do it, and they can cause big swings. I don't really see anything that would scare me coming into these reports. What about you?
No, I find it interesting that they're flipping core and headline after the previous results were flipped the other way. We've got a 0.3% projection on core, 0.2% on headline. But rounding out the year over year stuff, 3% and 3%, lining those up. And at that 3% mark, anything around it with rounding is going to be fine. I'm not anticipating anything important or impactful to happen with this. I think it's going to be fairly flat like it was last time. And I feel like by the time we get to Thursday, it's going to be more news about, the ending of the government shutdown, where we're going from there, how that's going to start impacting things. I really think that while you all always circle a day like Thursday with all these big red bars on important data, I feel like this just isn't one where there's a lot of room to miss personally.
I would agree.
Yeah. Let's talk about what's going on with the Fed funds rate. This chart has changed since the last time we've talked. And now, like you had said, I think when we were talking earlier, the thoughts on is Chair Powell right? Is there maybe a need to pause on the December rate cut? Which I would ask you a different question, Andrew. Doesn't matter whether it's December 10th or January 28th. We're at what 97.5% at the end of January that we get this next cut. Shouldn't matter, doesn't matter if we cut in December versus January, knowing that we're going to get down into this 375 range.
Yes, to me it does matter because it matters based on investors' projections. It matters based on this chart. If
Hmm.
if this chart was reversed, and instead of 37% saying we're going to stay the same, if 37% said we're going to, if it was 37% we're going to get a cut and 62% saying we're staying the same, I don't think it matters moving the rate cut out to January 28th. I don't think it matters, but I do think if we see these projections stay where we project 63, 65, 70% rate cut, and we forego a rate cut on December 10th, there's going to be knee-jerk market reaction that isn't going to necessarily be knee-jerk. I say knee-jerk meaning it's going to happen and it's going to happen quick, but it might not calm down until mid-January ahead of the next rate cut. And to me, I think the Fed is silly if they're going to do a rate cut either the 10th or the 28th. I think they would be silly to go against market projections because of the volatility it would create in the market. I think the right move for the Fed, which we know, I am not a fan of Jerome Powell. He will probably not make the right move because he's an idiot. But just in case he's watching this, why would you not come out, make the rate cut, say, hey, we know we need to make one more cut right now. But since we made the cut in December, there's a very high probability we will just pause the January 28th meeting. Let investors know right out of the gate, this is what we're going to do. Why does it have to be such smoke and mirrors every time this man gets on stage? Why can't he just on the last Fed meeting get up and say, I'm Fed Chair Powell. I will not be bullied by an administration or by constituents to adjust the federal funds rate. If the markets say we need to cut, we're going to cut. And if the markets say we don't, then we won't. It's all these smoke and mirrors and games that are played.
I feel like you did just bully Chair Powell, and then said that he wouldn't be bullied. It feels like you're trying to push for
I would
a.
I would love to bully him. Get him on a conversation with me. He will walk away with his tail tucked between his legs.
So yeah, to just kind of piggyback on that, I think we know exactly why he's doing what he's doing, and it is because of the pressure from the current administration. He knows that he's got the markets by the cojones and can say, we are far from a foregone conclusion on this. Well, guess what? The markets are saying it is a foregone conclusion that we will have one cut between now and the end of January. That market projection is based on data and it's based on experts and it's based on your dot plots. So we know we're getting one by the end of January. Doesn't matter if it's December or January 28th. The amount of time it takes for a drop in the Fed funds rate to impact, your lending, to impact spending, to impact, economic development. It's not overnight. And we're talking about something that has to trickle down from bank costs all the way down to business costs to consumer costs. Like, this is not a real quick thing. 1 month, 2 months should not make a difference in the overall plan for the Fed and their dual mandate to control inflation and jobs. There should be no difference there, which is why I'm kind of agree with you. If we're on this, everything seems to make sense to support it. It should just happen. But let me ask you the hard question that I don't actually have the answer to because I've been doing some research on this morning and getting conflicting info. Assuming we have an end to the government shutdown here this week, what data will the Fed have available at the 12/10 meeting that they really, really need, specifically around jobs, because that's the data that we're missing? Will we get enough jobs data between the end of the shutdown and 12/10 to justify a strong response and an interest rate drop?
So I had the same question this morning. So I reached out to my friend Barry Habib because I figured if anybody would know the answer to this, it would be him. And he said that they will retroactively get access to the September jobs report. BLS will have that available ahead of the December 10th meeting. So
Yes.
the Fed will have access to September and October jobs data.
Well, let me ask
leading
you
into
this,
that.
though. The October jobs data was full on government shutdown. There was no data collection in October. So will the BLS go back and retroactively collect October data while in mid-November while trying to catch up everything else? Like rationally and practically, it doesn't seem like a reasonable expectation to go back and do dual data collection for all of that information. But I have a lesser understanding of the BLS's
That is,
data collection
and that's a
method.
good question. But I do know confirm they will have September, October. That's
Yeah,
a good point. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, unless data collection still happened.
yeah. We know September's data collection is already happened, already exists, is there, just needs to be analyzed and plugged in. And I do know from my research this morning that the federal, the government shutdown, BLS said we stopped collecting data. I did verify that at least. That there was no data collection done post government shutdown. So do they go back and get data? Is it easy to access? I don't know. We're going to find out. I don't know if the September data is going to be enough to let us know, what the Fed needs to know by December. I don't know if, the November collection data, I mean, shouldn't be out yet by the December 10th meeting. I mean, what we first Thursday of the month, second Thursday of the month, coming in for that? Like, I don't know. I
It's
guess
going
we'll
to
have
be
to see
it's
how this
likely
rolls
going to be
out.
too tight for September or for November's data for sure. October is a toss up of whether the data collection is going to be there, and
Yeah.
they may literally only have to look at September BLS, October ADP ahead of this December 10th cut.
And then you're getting into, is the September data relevant enough? Do we care? At that point, it's aged to a pretty good degree. It has to paint a picture and tell a story that's irrefutable. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting next 6 weeks as we get into this. I guess 4 weeks now at this point, as we get into where the data is going and how that's impacting things. But let's talk about how things were impacted last week from what we did have. Again, great big old nothing burger. ADP didn't really make a lot of impact on everything. We are still reeling from Fed Chair Powell's comments and hanging out in this same wheelhouse. Any thoughts or commentary on what's been going on with the 30-year fixed mortgage?
I mean, we've seen the jump up, we've seen the spike up, and it's we've talked about this in the lack of data, with the lack of data in the government shutdown. The little bits of data we have are going to matter a ton. Normally, an ADP jobs report coming in, 23,000 or 25,000 over isn't going to be a market moving thing. But right now,
17,000.
investors are looking
17.
17.
And we
17,000.
overreacted on 17,000.
Overreacted on 17. Okay. So, yeah, on
Of all
17,000, that wouldn't normally be a market reacting thing. But on a lack of data, with the lack of data we have, investors are just antsy. They're clinging on to everything. And that's why every word out of every Fed chair or every Fed member's mouth in a press conference, everything matters right now. And we need to get the government back open, get our data sources back open. As crappy as the data is from the BLS, at least we know it's consistently crappy. At least
whether
we
it's
know there's
crappy or not,
consistency there.
it's what drives reaction. It's what gets people moving. I mean, it doesn't really matter if it's good, if it's accurate, if it's valid, or if it's going to be severely adjusted in the future. If that's what moves markets, like that's what we have to care about. So I think to kind of put a bow on that segment, it looks like the government is going to be opening back up. We've got 60 senators who are saying they're going to vote on a resolution to open everything back. They're calling on the legislature to return to Washington to get a vote on this. Hopefully, ideally, it looks like this could all be resolved by the end of the week. And that means we can start getting data points back. So if I was to sum up what the end of the government shutdown looks like as it relates to what we're talking about in our course of business, is we get our data back, things will start reporting again. Obviously, you're getting more money back into the hands of people who spend it. Government employees, anyone who's collecting those checks, we're going to get more benefits back out. People get back to normal, spending gets back to normal. But there's going to be some injury from this that's going to last for a little bit. Whether or not the Fed treats that as transitory or not will remain to be seen. But the end of the government shutdown is imperative and looking forward and trying to project where things are going. Anything else you would add on how the ending of the shutdown impacts us as mortgage professionals and real estate experts going forward?
Not really. I think you nailed exactly what is going to be the impact on it. It's going to take time. Nothing's going to be immediate. It's not like the government, comes back to life and all light switches turn on and it's like the power comes back on at your house. No, like the microwave might not work for a week, it's just stuff we got to work through. So be patient with it. We'll try to bring you guys relevant data as it becomes available and continue to do this every week.
Yeah, I mean, even if it does turn right back on, it's not like the government's efficiency is ultra high or has great dependable data. But we're working with what we can get, and it's a large country with a lot of information, a lot of data points, and a lot of differences from one community to another. And data collection methods are different, and there's a lot of projections going on here too. Yeah, as it's relevant, we will share it. So I wanted to close out here with a question because you know what I'm going to ask because it's been all over social media. I'm trying to pretend like I haven't made some really, really strong opinions on this. So I'm just going to ask you, Mr. Cady, what do you think about the proposal of a 50-year mortgage being floated around all over that their social media?
Man, I'm a little passionate about this one because why? Because I'm in the industry and I actually ran the numbers on it. Okay, so let's just look at a mathematical setup on something. Okay. And I'm not even going to dive into the amortization schedule of that, how ugly that is, but just on monthly payment. Let's just look at monthly payment on this. And here's what I did is when I ran numbers for this, a 15-year mortgage is roughly a 0.5% lower mortgage rate than a 30-year mortgage. So I came to the logical conclusion that, hey, a 30-year to a 50-year is likely going to be about a 0.5% higher. Why? And someone actually asked me the question, why would an interest rate be higher on a 50-year mortgage? People's payments are lower. It's less risk. No, it's much more risk. The chances of someone entering a 50-year mortgage means that they likely don't qualify for a 30-year mortgage, meaning this creditor is now extending debt over 50 years. That's a huge risk factor. So let's look at a $400,000 loan. If we go with a 30-year mortgage at a 6.375, you got a monthly payment of $2,496 a month, principal and interest. Now you take that same $400,000 mortgage on a 50-year, a 0.5% higher interest rate at a 6.875, you got a monthly payment of $2,369. It's $127 a month lower payment for a 50-year mortgage in that scenario, but you tack on 20 years of additional debt. You tack on hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional interest over the course of 20 years. You pigeonhole yourself potentially into not being able to refinance because your first 7 years of the mortgage, you're only paying down about $11,000 in principal. And if markets fluctuate at all and you lose some value in your home, how do you refi in a scenario like that? To me, I think it's it is not a solution, but it is actually a symptom of the problem that we are even thinking about a 50-year mortgage. The problem is the affordability crisis we have in America, and the symptom is worth even talking about extending debt where someone would become a first-time home buyer at 34 years old and not have that mortgage paid off until they're 84 if they live that long. It's nuts.
Yeah.
Nash, your thoughts?
So I like how you said you weren't going to get into amortization and literally got into amortization because I'm only getting into amortization. I'm living in amortization. I'm a numbers guy. I'm a math dude. Math doesn't lie. And what was so infuriating about this topic is the number of mortgage professionals who don't understand the math. And as I'm going, I'm like, I've got an amortization calculator on my phone. I use it all the time. It's built into my calculator. Back in the day, and I'm aging myself here, but I started in this industry in 2006. You had to be able to calculate amortization. You had to be able to work up payments for someone on your phone, understand how this stuff works. And so we were very practiced at this. You may have gotten in after these were popular, but did you ever write 40-year mortgages?
No, I got in 10 years ago. So
okay, so you're post Dodd-Frank
really there.
And qualified mortgages. So back in the day, for a very short amount of time, 40-year mortgages were pitched as an option. They were about 0.375% higher or so. And I ran a lot of numbers on them because they were advertised pretty decently and they're out there. And no, I didn't write a single one. I had 0 of them for very similar reasons. The amount of savings you looked at is like, oh, it only I figured this would save me hundreds of dollars. Now it saves you $70 a month and adds 10 years. It's a terrible idea. I think it's really funny the sample scenario you went through, because literally, like, in front of me, I've got a sample scenario too. Both $400,000 loans. We happen to pick the same loan amount. I went 6 1/4 and 6.75.
So 0.5% difference, same thing.
We're literally thinking the same thing without having discussed this, because this is exactly what it's going to look like. So when I see people posting numbers and talking about a 30 and a 50 at the same interest rate, and I'm like, wait a second. Like, I know that we don't know, but what we do know is that these two things cannot be the same. If they are the same, then why wouldn't you write the longer amortization and give someone the flexibility to make whatever the payment they want to? Well, because consumers can't be trusted with that much power. But it makes no sense from an investor standpoint. You can't bundle these together in the same securities. They have to be their own thing because it's a completely different setup and structure. It's going to have a higher yield because the higher risk premium. I think 0.5% is a conservative estimate. If these were non-QM products that had real risk, and what that means is, like, right now with a GSE backed loan, the government sponsored enterprises, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, you're not necessarily getting true investor appetite for this product. Why would investors want a return of 6%, and then you subtract servicing fees, holding fees, all those things, versus investing in a 10-year treasury yield? It makes more sense. There's not enough true investor appetite. If not helped by government sponsored enterprises, we would have much higher interest rates. Flat out, like, investors don't necessarily want to be in that business when there are better products that can move and turn with less risk. Now, that said, yeah, it's going to be around 0.5% higher. But the argument I keep going back to is, what does that money cost? And this is where I think even advanced and skilled mortgage people who can say, this is why this is a bad idea, can't quite quantify it in the same way. I'm looking at my example and picking, if you did a 50-year, you're going to be in there for a little bit because, like you said, you're really hosing your equity position where you don't have anticipated appreciation like we've had before. So after 5 years, you either owe 373 on a 30-year or 394 on a 50. We are at $21,000 after 60 months of payments. And on my exact example here, it's $132 a month difference. So $132 a month in savings over 60 months. I hate to bust out the calculator and do math right here. That's $7,900 saved for a net position after 5 years at negative $21,000. So when you plug in the math and you say, I'm going to save $7,920, it costs $21,000 over 5 years. You can actually calculate that out and say that $7,920 has an annual percentage rate at over 44%. That's real math. The real math is that $7,920 cost you $21,000. That's 44% interest annually. Who would ever take out or borrow money like that? And I think that's the last step that everyone stops right before, because it's tricky math. But when we put it in those terms, in that perspective, why would anyone ever do that?
Yeah, I mean, that was my point. I was out of town, like I said, New York City for a wedding. And I'm just, every other Facebook post I'm seeing is people talking about, what's your thoughts on a 50-year mortgage? And I'm like, does no one actually have the brain power, or are they just too lazy to get in and actually run the real numbers? So I sat in the airport on my Sunday morning and I'm like, let me just actually run some numbers. And I'm like, I will create up why this is absolutely a horrible idea. And lo and behold, it's my most popular post I've shared in the last 12 months. Why? Yeah. Because I actually took the time to do it right. I'm at 90 shares on this post, 103,000 views in just over 24 hours.
Yeah, because I probably should have made mine from my car.
Yeah, people are like, oh crap, it doesn't make sense. So yeah,
well, let me force you to think
in front of us
differently. Who does this help? Where could this be used? Because again, it's a mortgage, it's a tool, and you are a tool man here in the mortgage business, and I'm asking you a question I already know the answer to, but I want to see if you came to the same conclusion. Who actually does get help with this 50-year loan?
I mean, investors would eat it up. Investors don't love
Yeah.
cash flow, which is a problem because it drives more single family homes out to investors and allows investors to cash flow properties easier, which ultimately creates more homeownership issues, creates more renters and not more homeowners. I think that is one problem with this type of
Yeah.
mortgage if it's open to investors. But I'm curious what you're trying to catch me in here, because
Yep.
I'm
Let
not
me
following.
get you. So you did make a point that I've seen a lot as well that investors would be interested in. I'm going to put that squarely in the bucket of this is not who this is designed to help. This is supposed to be solving a problem on affordability. It's designed to be a homeowner solution to buy homes. So there's one X on this program. Who it actually does help. This is going to be the people that fit in that 51 to 53% debt ratio, who have been at their job for 18 months, can't count their bonus income possibly, have commissions that they can't use, have a spouse who works and can't be on the application, who are selling one home and buying another and have assets, who can easily float themselves for 6, 9, 12 months. But as far as their debt ratio qualifying goes, they've got 2 mortgages on here now, and one of them is going to go away. This is for people who have a debt ratio that's outside of guidelines, but their actual spending, their actual monthly, cash availability is not in line with their debt ratio. We talk to people all the time where their actual debt ratio versus like their real debt ratio, those are not the same thing. So we help people with high debt ratios sometimes because we know, okay, well, you're getting this, you have a roommate, your mom lives with you and helps contribute to the bills. Like there are always stories, and it's our job to understand those to make sure we're helping people make good decisions for the family. And if someone's in that 51 to 53% range, and now we can say, hey, cool, I can approve you now on this, but pay this instead. You've found someone who is getting approved who normally wouldn't be approved, but a mortgage person is going to advise them, don't you dare make this minimum payment. This is like an interest only loan. You pay it normal and throw that extra 130, 140, 150 bucks a month onto your mortgage. So I'm putting that back in the bucket of this is helping people. It's not designed to help, and it doesn't do anything for the problem of home affordability. It just gives mortgage brokers who know how to use tools another tool to help someone who should be getting help, but because of the rationale and logic, they just don't have the same qualifying income, or there are these compensating factors that make this loan make sense. Now I can make it make a little bit more sense, but this is essentially a DTI hack and not a home affordability tool.
Right. And how many people fit into that 51, maybe 52, 53 DTI that are there kind of falsely because they have a spouse that is not on the application that works? So we are going to literally pass congressional laws to change Dodd-Frank to put a new program together that will probably help 0.5% of actual home buyers obtain financing the correct way. Congratulations. When we could simply go in and reduce the G fees, the guarantee fees by our GSEs by 40 basis points. Yeah, it would take their profit from 3.9 billion to 3.8 billion, but it would drop interest rates by about 0.25% across the board and help a hell of a lot more people. All
You
it
get to my
is to
last
me
point.
is a bunch of smoke and mirrors. It's like Fannie Mae dropping the minimum 620 credit score. Okay. Yeah, if you're under 700, FHA makes more sense every time on a primary residence. And good luck if you're an investment property or a second home getting an approve eligible if you're under 660, unless you have $1 million in reserves. So, we're dropping the 620 minimum. Congratulations, you have helped no one. All it is another carrot that's strapped to the back of the American consumer, hanging in front of them, and they chase the carrot, and the faster they run, the further the carrot gets away. They hang the fishing pole on the back of the consumer, and they dangle a carrot in front of their face like, "Oh, we're helping you. Let's drop the 620 minimum." Bullshit. It does nothing for them.
I love feisty Andrew. Yeah, you hit it exactly right. It's completely irrelevant. The people who would benefit from that dropping 620 that have a 610 FICO and are putting 40% down and have a 30% debt ratio, they should have been able to get a loan anyway. They should be getting an approved eligible anyway. Having a delineation and a minimum FICO score for someone who can clearly establish well enough to break the algorithm and get an approved eligible, by all means, get you a loan, bro. You have to have obscenely good qualifications to get an approved eligible sub 620 anyway. So those extremely few people where it makes sense and it's a much higher interest rate, the PMI would be a nightmare, but you're not putting less than 20% down to getting approval on that anyway. So it's a completely irrelevant, hey, look at me distraction. It's not actually doing anything. You hit the nail on the head. G fees. G fees are the answer. No one knows what G fees are. Not even seasoned mortgage lenders. They don't understand that the GSE guarantee fees right now are hovering, I think, about 0.56%. They've increased a lot in the last 15 years.
0.56 points. 0.56% in rate. If the G fees went away, interest rates would come down by over 0.5%. Just done. Now
you have a direct impact on consumer affordability without impacting any kind of investor appetite in a way that only hurts the GSE profitability, which at the end of the day, these are supposed to be GSEs, which are designed to have some sort of control on consumers and affordability. They have their finger on the button to be able to do this with no problem whatsoever and still make billions of dollars.
Well, 3.9
no reason not
last
to.
quarter. 3.9 billion last quarter was a profit.
They're
dropping the G fee by 40 basis points would drop their profit from 3.9 billion to 3.8 billion.
The only downside of this is it's hard to take credit for it. That's it, because not enough people understand G fees. It would be easier and they'll get a lot more credit for adjusting LLPAs, which I think they should do both. But yeah, we could talk about that all day long. The G fees need to be adjusted. I keep seeing more and more chatter about this from people I really respect in the industry that have a lot more knowledge. And now that we've had Fannie and Freddie being so profitable for so long now I think that the idea of privatization is kind of off the table at this point. So knowing that they're staying government sponsored, yeah, the government should be working in the interest of the people. This is our government. So we should be able to insist on, you don't need to make more money. Fannie and Freddie are so cash heavy right now anyway. What we need is affordability that doesn't have a lot of significant drawbacks for other people and can harm those that they're designed to help. A fifth-year mortgage hurts a lot of people. It helps people. It's not designed to help. So, we're going to keep the conversation going, talking about the things that really do matter. And I think we'll hit that more next week as we talk about, hopefully, what, getting some more data, getting some more information about post-government shutdown, trying to have some more clarity around what the December 10th meeting looks like. And man, it's going to be a fun one. Andrew, any final thoughts before we close out?
I think we're good, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome, brother. Love Feisty Andrew on a Monday morning. Hope everyone has a fantastic week. Use this information, start some conversations, make sure you're the expert, and get this to the people who need to know. Until then, we'll see y'all later.